Welcome to the Organic Land Management and Cutting Edge Alternatives panel. My name is Joran Viers. I'm the local county extension agent here in Bernalillo County. Though I have a background in organic and sustainable agriculture, as a county extension agent, I am one of those people that is called upon to make pesticide recommendations. And I have learned to try to follow people where they're going while trying to push them in the direction I think they should go in, and it's always a trade-off. But we're going to talk about land management, and I wanted to just kind of touch on this idea that land management decisions and practices happen at a lot of different scales. There's the industrial ag scale where we're talking about, you know, hundreds or thousands of acres of monocrop, and those are managed a certain way. We even have industrial scale organic production, and it has many of the same weaknesses that industrial scale conventional agriculture has. We have small scale agriculture, the backyard farm or the small scale 20-acre farm, and frankly a lot of what we do in New Mexico qualifies by USDA standards as small farm. Almost everything we do in New Mexico is small farm by USDA standards. And then we even have the backyard, you know, truly just the garden, the landscape kind of issue. And it is my professional opinion that that's where we see some of the worst abuses in pesticide use is the homeowner. I mean, I'm not trying to give farmers a pass. There's a lot of misuse of product, but it's coming out of their bottom line. So generally, they're a little bit more careful about only using the recommended amount, whereas the homeowner is more inclined to be, well, a little was good, so a lot's going to be better. And in thinking about this panel on the way up here this morning, I was reflecting on the vast number of advertisements that one hears no matter what media one is following, television, radio, print. There's a huge industry out there pushing homeowners into simple solution chemical use. And it's something we have to deal with. So this idea of pesticides, what is a pesticide? You know, just real briefly, it's anything that harms or kills a organism that we consider a pest. And it's typically a chemical approach we're talking about. And even in organic farming, pesticides are used. They are organically approved pesticides, and we hope that they are at some level more benign, but the truth is there's a lot of organic pesticides that are much more broadly toxic than some of the non-organic options out there. So it's not always just a matter of, well, is it organic or not? And again, I have to, in my professional capacity, make pesticide recommendations, but it is my great joy to be able to convince a lot of people that it's not actually a pesticide issue. You don't need to apply a pesticide. There are cultural things that you need to do first that will probably take care of the problem, etc. So what we're trying to do is get people to get away from that mentality of give me that quick fix that's going to work today, I don't care about tomorrow, and get them to focus on how can we kind of manage that ecosystem, whether it's, again, a backyard or 2,000-acre ranch. How do we manage it in a way that over time it's reasonably stable? So what we need in order to do that then is we need sets of practices that have been ground truthed, that have been field tried, that have been refined, and that provide sufficient results with acceptable side effects. There are side effects to anything you do as a land manager, whether it's apply a chemical material or take some cultural action. There's going to be consequences, not all of them positive. So we're always balancing, you know, did we get enough of a benefit without too much of a downside? And that's what we have to do as land managers, is kind of think through complex situations and find these solutions that work. And that's the beauty of the folks who are going to speak to you today, is that is what they are doing in their work. So I'm going to go ahead and briefly introduce all four of the speakers, and then each one of them will have about 15 minutes to talk about their particular line of work. If possible, let's hold most of the questions until afterward, and we can go into great depth and great length on the questions. But if we can just let them have their say up front and write down your questions so you don't forget them. All right. In no particular order except the order that they were listed, which is not necessarily the order in which they will speak to you, I would like to introduce Lani Malmberg. Lani, yes? Lani, excuse me, Lani. Lani grew up on a cattle ranching family, and she went to graduate school to study weed science and got the idea there of offering a goat grazing service for those who didn't want to use chemicals for weed management. So she started a business, and it's growing quite well. It's called Ewe4ic Ecological Services, and she now has 2,100 cashmere goats. She contracts out to governments, private landowners, to do weed control, noxious weed control, fire reduction, reseeding, watershed management, and land restoration. And she also offers noxious weed mapping and inventory. She's on the board of directors for Beyond Pesticides, and because her business requires her to move her huge herd of goats all over the place, she herself is a bit of a gypsy, owning no land and living on the road with 2,100 goats.
That sounds challenging.
They're in the parking lot now.
They're in the parking lot now. Actually, we turned them loose on the grounds here at UNM. We figured there was some vegetation they could feed on for a while. Matt Chu, Dr. Matthew Chu, is an assistant research professor at Arizona State University in the School of Life Sciences. He has extensive research on non-native species in riparian ecosystems, in particular looking at tamarask trees in the Southwest. And interestingly, some of his findings point to an undervaluing of the ecological role that those species may be playing. They may be noxious and introduced, but it doesn't mean that something out there isn't starting to use them. He's the author of numerous publications, including The Monstering of the Tamarisk, How Scientists Made a Plant into a Problem. And he also co-authored The Rise and Fall of Biotic Nativeness, a Historical Perspective. Ann Adams, Dr. Ann Adams, is the Director of Community Services for the Holistic Management International Organization. And in her role there, she designs and implements training programs and educational events for other trainers as well as for practitioners. She regularly teaches classes, both in person and through distance learning media, and provides consulting for family farms and ranches. She's been a holistic management certified educator since 1998, has written countless articles, and helped develop agriculture-based software for financial and grazing planning. She owns a small farm in the Manzano Mountains, southeast of here, where she raises goats and chickens, and probably not 2,100 goats, I'm guessing, just maybe 2,100 chickens. And speaking of lots of poultry, John McMullin is the farm manager for Embudo Valley Organics. Embudo Valley Organics is a nice little, mostly turkey operation, I guess exclusively turkey?
Chickens for eggs.
Chickens for eggs, thank you. They're up in Embudo between Espanola and Taos along the Rio Grande there. 25 acres under cultivation in a mixture of pastures and grains. They also do produce eggs, and they produce the nation's first certified organic turkeys that don't have any artificial ingredients. You guys also do poultry feed.
Certified organic, full range of poultry feed.
So there's a lot of neat services going on there. So those are our panelists, and we're going to go ahead and start then with Dr. Ann Adams.
Afternoon, everyone. I'm going to be focusing on holistic plant grazing as the primary tool to build soil fertility and build a regenerative agriculture. I think if we need to move beyond pesticides, we need to think about that vision of regenerative agriculture. And also to come to this with a perspective of that everybody can help make that happen. It doesn't matter whether you're a producer, own a lawn and take care of it, or buy food. All of those actions can be done in such a way that we can create a regenerative agriculture together. So with holistic planned grazing, what we're really talking about is partnering with nature. That's the focus of this. We're looking at one point, these landscapes were healthy before we got here. No feedback here. And so what we're looking at is how do we integrate livestock into agriculture, back into it? Because at one point we had a livestock not as a separate enterprise. And over the years, we've had cropping and we've had livestock, and they get separated out. And what we're trying to do is say, how can we integrate them back in with some new knowledge, new technologies to help us do that in a better way to improve that soil fertility? Because that livestock serves multiple functions of mowing, fertilizing, providing income for the producer who's managing those animals. And the other piece that we remember is that the livestock above the ground are helping feed the livestock below the ground, because a living soil means there's millions and billions of microorganisms that need to be fed constantly. It's not a one-shot where you feed them and, okay, now you can just take care of yourselves. There needs to be constant food source for those organisms. Livestock above the ground help do that, but you can also do it with compost, compost tea, raw milk, any number of other methods too. And then we need a process by which we can use a systems thinking approach, an adaptive management tool. And that's what holistic management is. We teach it all over the country. It doesn't matter whether you're in New Hampshire or New Mexico. It doesn't matter if you own 1 acre, half an acre, or 10,000 acres. This is a process that helps people understand how nature functions and how to partner with nature. And you'll see that there's a lot of ecosystem services that happen as a result of this as well. So the key paradigm shift that has to happen is to recognize that soil fertility is more precious than diamonds. And the more we can create soil fertility, the more resilient the landscape is, the better ecosystem services we have, and the better regenerative agriculture we can have, healthier food, healthier land, healthier people. And we have to remember that with nature, nothing's wasted. It always goes in. You can either cash it out in the form of grazing it off in a given year, or you can let it go back into the ground and build biological capital. But nothing gets wasted, and to shift from that paradigm that we somehow are wasting something by our management practices of not using it all in a given year. So I'm going to just go through a number of pictures that show what some of the land managers around the world are doing. With this 40 million acres, probably more, under holistic planned grazing on 6 different continents. People are using it all over the place, and they're incredibly creative about how they're doing it. This is Cockatoo Creek in 1992. This is in northern Australia. You can see bare ground, and the only thing that's really able to survive at this point are some shrubs and trees. 7 years later, you see the landscape has changed significantly because of that rancher or farmer managing the livestock in such a way that it's building and soil fertility and allowing for regenerative agriculture to happen, because he's able to keep more animals on there, earn more money, spend more money locally. It's not a ranch that's collapsing and no longer an economic resource. It is instead got lots of grasses there, perennial, sequestering carbon, improving water infiltration, as well as providing a better living for him. This is 2 bottles of water same day in New South Wales. Rain event happened. You're going to see upstream here on the right, you can see the sediment load in that stream. It's looking pretty good to me. I'm here in New Mexico, so that looks like a lot of ground cover. I'd be pretty excited. But there isn't actually 100% ground cover. So the water, the rain that's coming down is adding sediment load to that creek, and that is what you are seeing right there. That's upstream of this property, 500-acre property. The stream going through that acreage is probably about half a mile long. This is what it looks like coming out, same day. Okay? So that's why the 1 bottle has all the sediment. That's the water coming in. He just stuck a bottle in the jar in the creek as it came in, went down to the other end of his property and stuck it in the stream, another bottle in as it was going out. So that's the capability of a landscape that isn't adding sediment. It has enough vegetation there in the around that riparian area to actually filter the sediment coming through, because there's no sediment being added to it because there's 100% ground cover on that property, whether either through living grass or dead matter down on the ground, creating a sponge. So, and then here's a little research that was done in South Australia in 2001 when they started the program. So they had the conventionally managed areas and the planned grazing areas. So they're each at about a 1 millimeter per minute water infiltration rate. In 2003, it was kind of a drought year, so there wasn't as much rain coming down. So the conventional folks ended up having the same water infiltration rate. We can see that there was an 8 millimeter average on the planned grazing areas. So an 8-fold difference there. 2005, there was a better rain year. So as they say, rain always makes us look smart. And everybody did a little better that year. But you notice again the difference, almost a 5-fold difference there in terms of water infiltration rates because of the grazing practices, which you saw on the other slide. So what we're really talking about is these two tools. We have all these tools available to us. We have money, labor, technology. Technology is our favorite one that we go to. Pesticides would fall into that category. And then we have grazing and animal impact and some management guidelines that help us. And Lani's going to talk a lot about that, the details of that, as I assume John probably is going to too. So what I want to point out is that tool of human creativity. That's the tricky one. We get into our mindset that certain things have to be done certain ways. Noxious weeds are bad. Noxious weeds must be poisoned, taken out of the system, whatever the habits are. And how do we break away from that and use the tool of human creativity, as you're going to be hearing from other members of the panel and some of these other ones, that people are saying, look, just because that's something we did do, how can we integrate livestock back in? How can we use that tool more effectively to create that living soil, that soil fertility, to create regenerative agriculture? So what we're really talking about is the cycle of life, the carbon cycle. And it's, taking the mineral cycle, the birth of a plant, the growth of it, the death and the decay of it. And the challenge is, in some areas, like here in New Mexico, what we have is this, growth during our rainy season, 2 months. And then at the same time, because we've got moisture in the soil, we've got these microorganisms that are helping cycle things. But then the rest of the 10 months out of the year, we've got this massive plant die-off, and the microorganisms also go inactive or die because of that dryness. And so there's nothing to cycle the plants like they would in New Hampshire, just because there's so much year-round moisture. So in 2/3 of the world, which is like New Mexico, this seasonally humid environments, also arid environments, the best way to recycle that nutrients, those minerals, is through the gut of the animal. The gut of the animal has the microorganisms in it so that it can take the standing dead stuff and get it on the ground in a nice form of fertilizer that can be used by the microorganisms, because fungi and bacteria can't jump out of the ground and grab a plant and pull it down in. So the animals are helping take it to the soil surface to build that soil fertility and make it happen. In terms of ecosystem services, here's an example of the amount, how you graze or cut a grass and the amount of root structure that's in there. So you've got on the left here a grass plant that's been cut every 2 weeks. This one's been cut every 4 weeks, and this one's been cut every 8 weeks. And what you can see is the amount of root mass significantly increases depending on its ability for that plant to recover and have an opportunity to exude from its roots the carbon, the CO2 that's coming out of the air into the plant and feeding the soil life in the soil. So an uncut plant is basically about the same as an 8-week one. So what we can see is that about an 8-week recovery is necessary for this type of plant. And the more that we can allow for that plant recovery to happen in a way that there's sequestration of the carbon, the CO2, into the soil, then it becomes this carbon sink and is another ecosystem service, as well as providing opportunity for people to earn a living from this practice as well and improve the productivity of the landscape. So there's some people that would say that it takes 100 years to grow an inch of topsoil. And what we're finding is there are people out there trying all different kinds of practices that say, no, you can grow an inch in a year. Or some people would say, I can even grow 6 inches in a year. And I don't know about all of the exact capabilities of people, but what we can see is the dark layer of topsoil here being built on land with, these are 2 shovelfuls of dirt taken from 2 different sides of a fence, one with livestock and one without. And that dark organic matter is, again, an indication of soil fertility, of a living soil that's being fed through planned grazing. So how can we integrate livestock into agriculture? Here's somebody that says, well, why not sheep in vineyards? Why not sheep in orchards? Why not goats in vineyards? Why not goats in orchards? Using the hot wire here to keep the sheep from eating the vines, they can take care of all this landscape so that it remains covered instead of being bare. Here, ecosystem services are lacking. Carbon is going up instead of going down. Water infiltration is poor because the water is going to be evaporating back up with that kind of bare ground. And you're going to have to do all kinds of inputs in terms of pesticides, fertilizer, tilling, cultivation, those kind of things. Instead, you've got this willing employee doing all of that for you over here, and you can sell it as well and add additional income. So some of the research suggests that you might get a slightly less production. Some cases you actually might get more in terms of the vines, and then on top of that you've got an extra enterprise in terms of income from that. It does require new systems and new thinking and making changes. That's the catch. We have to change. People ask, what about horses? A lot of people have small acreages, especially here in New Mexico. Same thing. It's any herbivore, and again, you're going to see this throughout with other members of the panel. Hot wire fence, portable water, keep them tight in one area, move them around, give that time for recovery. Pigs. It's a great way to till the soil. A lot of people use pigs in a way that they can come in and plant, so they don't actually have to plow or disc a field. They use the pigs to do it instead, and another income stream. Cattle and crops. People use cocktail seeding, maybe 16, 30 different seeds all mixed together in a seeder. You can drill it, and then some people are using it for annual crops, which they actually do as a cash crop. Other people are just having the cattle harvest it. Dairy cows. You can see this is irrigated pasture. You can see down at the bottom, they've grazed. They're in here now. They'll go here next. Give this time adequate recovery. Same principle. Keep them bunched. You can do it on a small scale. This person actually is milking their animal out in the pasture. So while in the previous situation, they're going back to the barn to be milked, fertilization is happening 24/7 here instead of only part-time. So these are all the different ways you can build resilient landscape. The interior part of that land is not irrigated. It's all drought, but it's the difference in management that you can see this by borders. And so by building resilient landscapes, we create that regenerative agriculture. And there is more information on our website at holisticmanagement.org that you can get free downloads about holistic plant grazing and get on our mailing list. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. I'm always fascinated in this day and age to see an actual pasture-based dairy as opposed to a feedlot dairy. It's the way cows were meant to be. All right, Dr. Matthew Chu is up next. He's switching technologies here. Please do.
our little technology glitch there and the fact that I'm spoiled. Use this. Get it to come up. Have it yet? Yeah, it's trying. Okay. I'm inevitably the odd man in a group like this. It doesn't matter what the group is. My job today is to make your life harder, not easier. And I'm going to talk about, kind of make you wonder about a problem. Make you wonder whether it's a problem, at least the way you've been led to believe. First, though, since it came up this morning briefly, and there was mention of Agent Orange and its use in Vietnam, the Vietnam operation was called Operation Ranch Hand. I met a Vietnam veteran at ASU the other day. We happened to sit down at the same table and started talking, and he said, "I have this picture I took." So I just thought you'd appreciate that. It was exciting. I've never seen this before. So, all right. So what am I going to do here? I'm going to talk about some of this stuff. Why are introduced species a problem for us here today, for this group? And I've been struggling with this all the way up to lunchtime. What am I going to tell you? We lump them into this single phenomenon of invasive species. That's intuitively appealing. It's easy. I think it's wrong. Once we lump them, we think they're categorically bad, and their existence itself is a problem. They make convenient scapegoats. They have no effective political advocates. There is no constituency for them. Why does that matter? Once again, they make convenient scapegoats. And as a result, they represent a major marketing opportunity for the biocides industry. This is the greening of pesticides. There are all kinds of people who are perfectly sincere in their desire to help nature by spraying it. It's a big industry. And biocides people know this. They're marketing hard. Go to vegetation management conferences, and I promise you there will be door prizes, and I promise you some of them will be gallons of Roundup. And people will be thrilled. So, here's a paper, a chapter from a book that UNESCO put out. And I just want you to see this first line, this first sentence in the contents, invaders and monsters. Monsters. So they say intentional introductions may ultimately lead to the Frankenstein effect. And I'm going to run you through this really quickly, just so you're not going to get to read it all. So all kinds of people have called these things NISs, non-indigenous invasive species. There are various versions of this, right? Malignancies in the environment. E.O. Wilson calls them the stealth destroyers of the American environment. Jared Diamond calls them part of the evil quartet. It's been widely claimed. Well, it's been claimed. Okay, it's been claimed. That's a great reference. But they're likely to rise progressively to the most widespread and dominant proportion of the terrestrial biota. Many biologists call it environmental pollution. And as everyone's going to be happy to see, the McDonaldization. What could be worse? We've heard this before today. All right, so Tamarisk has been one of my sort of my major historical interest. I'm an ecologist, but I went to the dark side and started doing history and philosophy work. And so the biologists are pretty sure now that I'm a historian. The historians are pretty sure I'm a biologist. So you can find these papers. I'm not going to, I can't give you this story in the time available. These papers are downloadable as PDFs at that address, plus every stuff I've got up there. If you want to see this kind of thing. If you're really interested in tamarisk, you don't know the story of tamarisk and the fact that it was introduced on purpose and there was a specific moment in history for a specific reason that it became the enemy, and it's not what you think. The monitoring of tamarisk is about that. And the other paper is a review of some of the questionable science that's gone into this issue, because I don't think they thought they had to work very hard. It was obviously bad. But what I want to tell you right now is don't panic yet. A lot of us tend to think nature is like this, where there's a place for everything and you can put everything in its place and you know where it belongs, it's obvious, you can see where it goes. And one of the ways we know this is because it was there when we arrived. The difference between an introduced species and any other species is that we know how it got there. Or we think we know how it got there. But there's no positive definition of a native species other than that it's not introduced. Okay? There's no evidence of nativeness other than lack of evidence for non-nativeness. And this was understood by the guy who made up these distinctions in 1847. They have not changed since. Darwin didn't change them. Ecology didn't change them. These are ideas from a different time. And he was a lawyer, and he used immigration terms to talk about natives and aliens. All right, so is nature like this? Well, some people say that we have something called biomes. And here's a map of biomes, a very simplistic one. According to this map, there's only 12 places on Earth. And they're not, they're distributed across all continents and all kinds of places, right? Well, this actually tells us something. This tells us one of the reasons that introduced species do well. They get there, and they're not thinking, but if they survive and thrive and reproduce, they belong there. I mean, they're saying, this is my place. But they're just plants, right? They're just clams or whatever they are. Either it works for them or it doesn't. One thing that's going on, though, we have to understand why there are so many. There are about 20% of the species in any given ecosystem, on average, at this point, are introduced. Many more in some places. Why? Surface transportation, freight tonnage, just in the United States. Things are on the move. And our systems of transportation are very non-specific. I promise you that something came here with you. Inside you, outside you, in your luggage, on your shoe, something came here with you. Sea freight traffic. This picture up here in the upper left is of the Maersk, which used to be the biggest possible container ship. Could carry about 14,000 of these things at a time. There's now a new class of ship that's bigger, that's being built. And this, again, is number of trips. There might as well just be a solid line connecting a lot of these places now. And that's why all of our seaports have very similar flora and fauna now. Similar latitude, similar seats, similar water, you're going to get the similar thing, because these are moving stuff along with their cargo. Again, you came here by plane. There's a great animation of this, by the way, that shows 24 hours worth of air traffic. I didn't put it in here because I wasn't sure what we were going to deal with in the technology. But again, constant connection. It's like you took a flat map of the world and you just crumpled it up. And places that were never in contact before are now in contact. This is not only the world we live in, it's the world everything lives in. A lot of the stuff that's capable of sort of being entrained in this transportation system is coming with us. I was flying from California to New Zealand, had a nice fruit salad there from the airline. I lifted up the little sepal on the top of my big fat strawberry, and there's a jumping spider. It's going on all the time. And it's only relatively recently that they've started fumigating again in planes. Land in Australia, somewhere like that. Now they're going to make you sit there while they come through and spray you down. Okay. So how did this all get started? Well, it actually got started a lot before this. But what invasion biologists look back to is Charles Elton's book, The Ecology of Invasions. And I just want you to see, this is how he opens this book. And it's with a metaphor. And the reason it's with a metaphor is we don't know how to talk about this. We have to try to explain it as something else. This is the Cold War era. He's going to talk about atomic bombs and compare this problem, which he's trying to push, atomic bombs. So metaphors. Now English class. We've got a couple objects here. We have an invader, we have a plant. So how do we make a plant into an invader? Well, we need a metaphor. And so we could, what does this invader do? Well, he understands places, he understands territory and holding territory. Plant understand that? It's a plant. Not. What does this guy do? He plans, he strategizes, he coordinates. Does plant do that? Not that I've seen. Now, there are some cases where, we can say that in a way plants are communicating with each other. But I don't think they're planning their next trip across the ocean or to someplace, there's no sense of place here that like we could comprehend. And yet we've turned them into invaders. So what do we wind up with? Right? We've created this. We've created this idea. And then we get excited about it. Well, so that's a cartoon. Here's a classic invasive species from the Midwest. What can be done with this? Well, the next series of pictures I'll show you are from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, a poster explaining this stuff for kids. Here's purple loosestrife. Here's purple loosestrife according to NOAA. Each flower has a little bandit mask and a frown. Zebra mussel, another great Midwestern Great Lakes problem critter. But it is a mussel, right? It's just a mussel. Lots of them, yes, but it's just a mussel. Know what make of it? Green crab. This one's well known to some people from coastal areas. Again, what does NOAA make of it? Not only is it nasty, it's flipping you off. One of our students looked at this and she said, it's flipping the bird. And I honestly, naive me, I had never really realized this, but once we saw it, everybody said, yes, it certainly is. So why do I give you these? Well, because I have good pictures of them. There are caricatures like this of all kinds of stuff. These just all happen to come from one poster from NOAA. But green crab, here this week, by golly. And was somebody doing this on purpose? No. So we need to be careful. This is more complicated than, invasive species, horrible. Or even, alien species, horrible. This whole alien invasive species, these are not really ecological concepts. These are something else. These are, oh God, it's coming at me, what do I do? And to show you what you can do with this, and I'm not necessarily recommending this either, because this is no better science than what I've been talking about, is I could give you alternative metaphors. Okay? These things are not, they've been abducted, right? They had no choice in the matter. They had no idea what was going on. Some of them just get dumped, right? They're castaways. They're just marooned there. They may be surviving as individuals. Some of them go on, and because they're in the right place at the right time with some more of the same, then they, populations grow. And here, an ecologist could call this a founder. start to evolve. They integrate into the system. They may change that system. They may change it drastically, but in the process, they're still being ecological. Okay, so I mean, you can go, if you were taught these things this way, you'd have a very different impression than you do by being told, oh, they're aliens and they're invading. But it's the same things doing the same things. So, and I'm just about done. So here is the problem. I just picked the first one that came up today when I Googled this. All right, so here's this white top, which in 1962, somebody said if your cows eat white top, the milk is going to be nasty tasting, and so is the meat. There's one reference from 1962. And so this is now the selling point. We've got to kill this stuff wherever it comes up. And we're going to do it with herbicide. And here to help advertise and support this, you know, of course, is DuPont saying, oh, by the way, here we have this nice pesticide called Perspective. So you can kill Canada thistle with that. All right, so it's gone kind of nuts. And it's easy to let it slip by. So I want you to stop thinking about them as all one thing and understand that each one requires thought. Some of them don't need to be treated at all. Some of them do. Some of them maybe for your purposes do. But, you know, don't get railroaded here. Okay, I'm done.
One of the things I always enjoy is having some of my kind of preset notions and preconceptions challenged a little bit in this sort of a way. And I think this is a very good thing for us to think about. How long does a new species have to occupy a given zone before we say, okay, well, it now lives here, it belongs here? You know, the history of the planet is full of creatures and plants moving wherever they could. That's what we all do. All right, John.
Joran. Hello, my name is John McMullin. I'm manager of Embudo Valley Organics. We are a small family farm in northern New Mexico, right on the Rio Grande. And it all started for me when I started working there at 20 years old in 1990. And they were a seed farm. We were growing heirloom beans and corn. And couple years in working there, every year the grasshoppers were just getting worse and worse. And by 1993, after a couple of warm winters, we had what we called a biblical plague of grasshoppers. And everything we planted in 10 acres that year was eaten. You know, the whole plants, the flowers, everything was eaten off. Not one bit of the crop was harvested, and just a total waste. And so that year we did nothing but battle them in every way we could imagine. Being certified organic, there was nothing we could spray, or we didn't want to spray. We wanted to do it any kind of natural way we could. And we'd always had a few turkeys on the farm just for ourselves, and realized, well, everywhere we had the turkeys, there really is not a hopper problem. And so the very next year we bought our first batch of 200 turkeys, and for the first time ever, I was happy to see hoppers. Come on, hoppers, out here. And so we let the turkeys out and started running around and chasing grasshoppers and eating them. We called them our turkey militia. And it was fun to watch. We all loved it. And that was the start of our turkey farm. So, and I never realized my first few years there, we were constantly taking soil samples and deciding, wow, this is some rough soil up here in these northern mountains. We better get all these kind of amendments and keep adding stuff to the soil every year. We just need to keep adding and adding to try to have any kind of soil. And as Ann was saying, the soil is the bank. Once you realize that the soil is everything on a farm, everything springs from that, from the animal to the plant, to you, to the water, everything comes from. So once you realize that, and once I started having turkeys in our system, it all started to become like a full circle that you could really see with your own eyes, and see the soil change, see the plant's health change, see the animal's health change. And it was really nice to watch. And so for me, being sustainable is almost not doable without animals. I don't see how you have a farm that, you know, you have in a sustainable system without having some kind of animal input with it. And this is a field of buckwheat, and looks very healthy. And you know, I remember this was a picture taken in the mid-90s. I could be standing out in this field and hear a buzz, almost like a helicopter. And at first few times I heard it, I thought, my God, that is so loud, what's going on? And you'd go and there'd be a swarm of bees, so thick that they're literally so loud, you can't believe it. And they just love buckwheat. They just go through like crazy. So what you see up there is some hoop houses. And so what we do for the first 4 weeks of the turkey's life, of course, I have to raise them in a brooder, you know, where I control the heat and temp and raise them to harden them off a little. But once they're old enough, I put them out in the fields. And at first I started letting them just run around, but I had never seen a chicken hawk or a eagle in the area. You put little birds out and all of a sudden you can't believe how many predators showed up and thought, hey, free meal, swoop down and grab a turkey and fly right off, and I'd watch it happen. So for the first 4 weeks of their life, when they're on the outside, I have to have them inside a hoop house with a pin attached to it, and just to protect them. But once they're about 8 weeks old, I can open it up and they are free to run around anywhere we go. And so anywhere around those open fields. I have about 12 acres fenced off and 1 acre pastures. And this was Tom Brown. Every year we get a few wild birds that we raise up and don't process, as we call it, to sell for meat. We just let them become part of the farm and hang and run around at their own discretion. One of the things I wanted to talk about was we call it the home of the happy turkey, and it's not just a slogan for us. We really care about the birds that we're raising. We really care how their life is lived before they have to die for us. And so for me, we treat them as almost family members. We don't name them knowing that we are going to process them, but we basically give them as happy a life as we can. They have as much fresh grains to run and eat, and fresh water, fresh food that we grind on the farm every week fresh, that we want them to have the best life they can. And when it comes time to process them in the end, we actually thank every bird as they're being brought in. We thank them for their life. They thank them for the gift they're giving to us. And for me, I really do feel it's a big part of what they are giving to us, that you need to be respectful of where they come from. And so what we simply do is they are eating down some fresh grains in that 4 weeks that they're confined. We just put these houses on wheels and move them to a new spot in the field and just do that every few days. And then the ground looks totally beaten and dead there, and 2 weeks later it'll look just like next to it. It comes back very fast. And one of the great things about turkeys is that they are a herd animal. And so we never have groups of larger than about 250 birds at a time. I get about 1,000 birds a year, so I'll have 4 groups, and I keep them separated. But at 250 birds, just a couple of guys can go out and simply push the whole birds along over an acre, move them to a new pasture in just 30 minutes. It doesn't take any time, because in the turkey society, everybody wants to be at the front. So it's a mad dash to get to the front, and you don't want to be the last turkey in line, and so everybody's racing to be out front. And so they're very easy to herd. Now, unlike, I do have chickens, and we only keep about 50 to 100 chickens. 10 chickens go out. Well, it'll take me an hour to catch those 10 chickens. It's like herding cats. They all go in different directions, and no sense to it at all. So we also like to make a distinction for our birds that they are field grazed. A lot of people think free range means something, and it's really just a marketing term. When you see free range on something, they are required to have access to the outside, but they'll never show you in a picture, but they can have a large confinement barn with 10,000 chickens or turkeys in there, and they'll have a 50 by 50 square out front that is just beat hard packed, looks like cement. And as long as they're allowed to walk out there, that's free range. That's what that means, just so everybody's clear. So where we are on the Rio Grande has actually been designated wild and scenic. And so being under that designation, the BLM, the River Service, they all have something to say about, what you're doing on that part of the river. And so with us being organic, we're very happy that, of course, we're not spraying or adding anything to the soils that runs off into the river that would be harmful. Because in the river there is quite an aquatic life that's there. We have a huge wildlife that comes down to the farm. We have a large coyote population, bobcat, mountain lion, even foxes, lots of stuff. And we're very happy just to simply fence our turkeys out. We do not kill any of the predators. We do get predation. Bobcats are incredibly handy at figuring out any way to get over the electric fence, climb any tree, climb any obstacle to leap in. We simply trap them and release them somewhere else. We do not kill them. I lose about 10% a year, it seems, to the wild. And I've just told people I consider that my tithing to the wild. Okay, they have every right to be there. I want them as part of the system. And just since I'm trying to farm here, I'm not trying to exclude them or kill them or eradicate them. They are part of the system. I consider the land all around. One of the nice things that evolved from getting into the turkey business when we got into it was there was no organic meat around, so there was no organic feed around. So when I first started trying to call around the country or just find anybody to help me, how do I feed these turkeys organic feed, to even call them organic, everybody said, well, there's no organic feed. And so it was kind of, for us, just reinvent the wheel in what does it take to grow a turkey or chicken or any kind of poultry organically, and just by trial and error really came up with our own feed ration that now I sell throughout the whole state. And that has really become the #1 business of the farm, is a feed business that I can basically sell feed throughout the entire state for every little mom and pop just trying to have their 10 chickens in the backyard and want to eat the best quality egg they can. Well, now I can provide them with a product that really creates that egg. So this was in some of the early years where, as the hoppers were my bane of my existence, they would just run and eat and eat. I wanted to tell you that we also have the Audubon Society come in and do their annual bird count now on our farm for our area. And they found us about a decade ago, and ever since then they've just loved to come back and see all the diversity and how many species. And when they came in the fall of 2012 and did their bird count, their guy came to me and said they were record numbers. They did a count and had 67 different species of birds on the farm that day, counted in 8 hours. And the total number was 5,091 birds they counted that day. So not bad. Something must be healthy. Something, in the environment has to be working there. So, all right. Well, I was going to get into certification because they had asked me to talk about that. And just real quick, wanted to say, I've had a number of people tell me, well, I don't really want to be certified. I think there's too many hoops to jump through, too much expense. But when I crunch the numbers every year, it costs me about 1% of my sales to be certified organic. And yeah, jumping through the hoops is something you do have to put up with, but I find it well worth it because you're basically, making a commitment to people to tell them you are doing it sustainably and you're doing it in a way that matters and you care. Okay, thanks so much.
Since I had the pleasure of visiting that farm, but it is just a jewel up there on the river. And hats off to you and to David Rigsby for making it happen. All right, Lani.
This is a great panel to be included with, and I'm very grateful to be here. I went to a talk this morning about culture and having the culture that we bring forward with us. So that made me think about it a bit. My grandfather immigrated from Sweden. So I'm a Viking warrior first. They were cowboys. They came to the West and they were cowboys and rodeos and guys and cattle ranchers, and we roped and rode for a living, and I was very proud of that. And it was fun to me. That's just what I always wanted to be. My mother is the niece of Harold Ickes, the longest running Secretary of Interior. He was under FDR. Both of my parents were born going into the Great Depression, and I was raised with that thought always, although I didn't live through it, but I was raised like that. So I was ranching and didn't have any opportunity, and I had to go, and I got divorced. I had 2 little boys, 5 and 6 years old, and I decided that I was a really good cowboy, but what was I going to do when I was 50, which seems so far away? What was I going to do when I was old? Could I unload a semi-load of hay by myself still? Would I want to? Would my sons be proud of me? I thought my only way out of that was to go to school. So I went to college at 33 with those little boys to raise. And I got a degree in environmental restoration, botany, biology. Why is my microphone dinging? Oh, okay. This way. Good? No? Anyway, when I was getting out of, now what? Like that? Oh, okay. Let's see, lost my train of thought here. Oh yeah, went to college. He said, I can't believe you asked me that. I have a stipend, I have a project, I have no student. Do you want it? And I said, I'll take it. I said, what do I get? And he said, a master's in weed science. And I said, I never heard of such a thing, but I need that stipend to raise these boys, so I took it. So that's how I got a master's in weed science. When I got out of grad school, I did not want to go sell chemicals for chemical companies. I wanted to hold my values to me, which were living on the land, working outside, working with animals, and having my children with me. So I just made this up, and it just happened to work because of the timing, which I had nothing to do with, but it was really lucky. The timing of the age of awareness and environmentalism. So that's why I'm here right now, and that's who I am, and I've drug all that culture with me. So the key to my operation, of any good operation, if you're going to run goats, you got to have a good border collie. And you only need one. Whoops, sorry, let me get my things here. So we've been going since 1997. My younger son came home in 2009, and we run it together. The last 2 years, just he and I have done all the work. So we do a variety of things. Weed control, brush control, big now is fire fuel load reduction, erosion mitigation, flood control, reclamation work, reseeding, and we work for the federal government, state governments, counties, cities, private landowners, local people, homeowners associations, and giant corporations. This slide, we're on Chevron contract doing oil field reclamation work, and this is a pipeline. This is XL Energy in downtown Denver. And they hired us to come in and do their vegetation work, and that's 500 head. This is our electric fence we use. We roll out and stick it in the ground and move it sometimes 6 times a day, keeping those animals concentrated and moving fast. One of the very big deals is soil stabilization. The soil is the key to everything, and everything Ann said, Ann and I speak the same language, and I just show more pictures of what she said. But soil stability, and in the drought, and as we have less water to work with, it becomes more and more important to take care of the soil, and especially on steep terrain, where when you lose the water in the soil, that starts to crumble and come down the hill. So it becomes more important, and it's really easy to do that with a herd of goats, where they're pooping, they're peeing, their hoof action up on that steep hillside, and steep is easy for a goat. And you can see downtown Denver in the background there. This is the growth, the brand new growth afterwards. Mostly that's kochia, but we're healing that ground, healing the land, and healing the hillside. That's just before and after, and how we move the goats and move our fence. Sometimes we can't set any fence. This is the main gate coming into XL Energy, so we just held 500 there with one dog. And my boss came over and said, will you run over and eat the weeds around the holding ponds at I-25? I said, sure. And he said, you going to haul them over there? And I said, no, I'm going to run them down the street. And he said, well, we're all taking bets in the office that you'll be in jail by 5 o'clock. And I didn't think of that because, remember, I'm a Viking warrior and a cowboy. But so I called the cops. So on their dispatch record, I had called them first and told them I was going. Well, they sent a squad car and flagged me through the stoplight. And I just ran over there and ran back. But we just go anywhere we want to go. But the goats are so well behaved and they respect these border collies so much. And my dog's out of the picture, but there's one dog right here. Too bad he got cut off. So one guy, one dog, and we can go anywhere we want to go. And if I wanted to make them all stand on the other side of that yellow line, I could. One thing I like to do is empower people. They say, well, how do you empower young women? How do you empower people? I said, give them an orange flag and a good dog. This is on top of the Crazy Woman Mountains in Two Dot, Montana, where we tried to put 1,000 head of goats and 1,000 head of cows and run them together to take care of all the weed problems, double their produce that they had to sell, goats and cattle, on the same piece of land. Every time I'd push them together, in about 2 seconds they would start separating. Those goats would go straight up, just like cream. They'd rise like cream right to the top of the ridge. The cows would go straight to the bottom. But it's pretty fun, and I've been wanting to do research where I could bond a herd together, where I believe the goats would be the leaders, the cattle would follow the goats, those cows would move in ways and places they've never moved before, but I haven't got that. I haven't got anybody to go with me on that one yet. Uh-oh. What happened here? It's not going. There we go. Anyway, when you add goats to the system, it's all about diversity. And starting number one, soil. It's all about the soil and taking care of the soil. Soil, water, plant species, then the financial diversity of not having to have the outside inputs because those goats are recycling all the nutrients and holding the water in the soil. The cultural and social diversity, educational opportunities. Is Michael Chang in the room? There he is. He told me, he's our shuttle driver. He said he was going to go to Wisconsin and try and keep goats off trees. And I said, you better come to my camp first and I'll teach you how to handle goats before you go take that job. So I think he's going to come and we're going to teach him how to handle goats. And then animal behavior, and like John said, I don't see predators as a problem. They were there first. I'm the intruder. And I feel like I'm paying rent if I should, lose some, but it never bothers me. And I really don't have trouble. People's loose dogs are my worst trouble wherever I go. Here's 1,000 head running across a bridge on an Air Force base, Department of Defense contract. This is my son, Donnie, one dog. This was the same dog that was running through Denver, too. This dog is still with us. My herd is neutered males, which are wethers. Like this big boy here, he's still in the herd, and he's about 12 years old now. But I have about 500, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old of these big neutered males. And these are my favorites. These are the workhorses and the money makers. And they're my favorites to work with. So come across that bridge, jump the guardrail, go down, and not one goat runs into that fence. And that's how respectful and well-trained they were. Are and how easy they are to handle with a good dog and some training. Key to the operation, good dog. So this is some oil field reclamation out in southwest Wyoming, and this is, in a good year, 7 inches of rainfall. So I bet we go below 5 now. And the soil organic matter in my oil field work that I do is usually less than 1/10 of 1%. So I was asking Ann about what would you think percent soil organic matter would be in Ohio, and we said maybe about 5% or something. But I usually work where it's less than 1/10 of a percent, and that's where I start with. But that's what I want to build, is that soil organic matter, nutrition in the soil, recycling everything. What was here was bare ground or halogeton, which is a poisonous plant. I try to concentrate them, move them fast with that electric fence, and 1 year later, we had grass. We just hand broadcast this seed on these pipelines, and that's less than a year. Goats are very smart. They're very athletic. Sometimes there'll be a goat on every step. They'll go up there and lay down, then they'll come back down, and it's really funny. This is on top of the hills of Northern California, doing fire, fuel load reduction, tough country, a lot of poison oak, a lot of western diamondback rattlesnakes, steep country, and to me, worse than the brush problem was soil stabilization and how steep these hills were, and there's no soil stabilization at all. We set up a test there, and this is goats in 4 hours and then move, and the goats will eat the whole thing. They'll eat the whole brush stalk and everything if I were going to stay there long enough. Here's the key: poop, urine, and the hoof action. Cover the ground, protect the soil, feed the soil, feed the system. You got to feed the microbes and get the microbes underneath, like Ann said, the livestock below the ground. They have to be fed. You have to take care of them. You have to protect that soil surface. And this is in Colorado Springs last fall doing fire control. And we're working in these neighborhoods. These guys hired us up here. But it's so dry there. In that horrible Waldo Canyon fire in Colorado last year, it was 5 miles from this guy's house here. And these people are scared to death. But there's no water in the soil. It's so dry. The water's gone and the hillside's crumbling. And these houses are crumbling right down on top of the bottom houses. It's fascinating, but they got to take care of their soil there, and they don't even know it. See the buck deer? This is up on top of the hill in Colorado Springs. The deer came over, he jumped in, went through the goats, and jumped out the other side. And nobody even paid attention to him. Loading trucks, we load 4-deck semis, hire that out, get a good dog, make a funnel. This is the horse trainer on the ranch. I just said, keep that front goat moving, keep him moving, and load the 4 decks on the truck, pick up my camper, and I hire those trucks. So a good dog pickup camper, this is the whole operation right there. Get to where you're going, open all the doors, jump them out, get a border collie, there's my electric fence on the pipeline, get a dog, run them down to the job, and get your paycheck. So it's pretty easy to employ goats because you know their natural diet preference is exactly opposite to cattle and horses. Sheep are right in the middle, so you can do whatever you need to do. Soil is the key. I take soils test everywhere I go, so I know what's there and what we need to do and what to plant. But here it is. In the drought years here, I say we spend 364 days a year getting ready for the rain. I'm trying to prepare that soil to hold the water when it comes. I don't know when it's going to come. I don't care when it's going to come. But if I'm ready, the soil will hold the water. And if indeed you can increase the organic matter by 1%, that soil can hold a 10-inch rainfall or 16,500 gallons of water. The secret's in the soil. You've got to cover it, protect it, recycle. And this is about a paradigm shift and a big paradigm shift. And I'll see y'all upstairs when we go upstairs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lani. So I would like to first thank all of our panelists for sharing from their own work and experience with us. And I believe the next segment of this is a workshop, which is basically an extended question and answer session with all of these folks. And there was a question as to whether or not we were going to have to vacate this room. I don't know yet if that's the case.
We're moving upstairs.
We're staying? Ah, okay. In that case, maybe we could bring the lights back up, and we'll just go ahead and open up the floor for questions and discussion. And
I don't have any trouble with poisonous plants. You want me to use that one? Oh. I've never had any trouble, but I manage it such that I never force them to eat only poisonous plants, and then which season of the year you're on the job makes a difference. Like Chevron oil, they bring us a semi-load of water wherever we want it put. So it's fun working for Chevron. Other places, I go check out the job and bid it, and always, where is the water? Where do we get the water? That's part of how I write each contract.
Lonnie, I need to cut in just real quickly.
Sorry, Lani.
That's okay. That's the end of that.
I just want to announce that we are going to begin the other workshop panels right now, too. So, stay here if you want to follow with this in-depth discussion for organic land management. The other workshops will be where the workshops were this morning upstairs. We have signs on the doors, and we'll be directing you to the rooms. But we'll have Resilience Planning 101, the Pollinators and Pesticides workshop, which is going to be really good. And what's the third one? Agua es Vida, which is also they're all really important, so I don't know how you're going to make your decision, but go upstairs for the other workshops and stay here for this one.
Of course, none of them are more important than this one. So, other questions? Yes.
What do you typically charge for one of your turkeys?
They go for, on the farm, $4 a pound. In the store, they're about $5 a pound.
They're not cheap, but they're good. Questions, comments?
Deputy just talked everybody out of our...
I guess so.
They're available at La Montanita Co-op here in Albuquerque and Santa Fe, and Sid's in Taos, and Semilla Grocery in Las Vegas. Nope, just for Thanksgiving. We're just seasonal.
What do you use to power the electric fence and generator?
No, I've never had good luck with solar things, but we carry 12-volt batteries. We all have acid holes in the right side of our jeans. 12-volt batteries and an energizer. We just carry that with it and keep it charged up. Well, the goats do respect them. You don't need to turn them on, and sometimes in urban areas we don't turn them on because the little kids are always hanging on to them, and people's dogs are in them all the time. But it keeps the predators out, just keeps everybody honest on both sides. I think they do. So if I force them into a situation with electric fence, I can force them to maybe eat more than they should. But if they're just out in open range, I don't think they would ever eat something that they shouldn't. But just by managing, I've never had trouble with that. And they eat poison hemlock, poison ivy, poison oak, loco weed, death camas. They eat it all, and I've never had trouble.
We have a very small operation, but clover actually, because of bloat, can be an issue. Are in an area where there's clover, and the cause bloat and with
Well, I think that goats are the hardiest, and they're the most resistant because of the enzymes in their gut. Horses are very sensitive, but they won't eat a lot of those things and are never in a place where they would anyway. There's a lot of things cattle won't eat. Cattle and horses are grazers. They prefer all grass, 90% grass given a choice. Goats are browsers. They're clear on the opposite end of the scale. So horses and cattle, they just don't eat a lot of that stuff. Goats eat everything. I've never had anything that a goat would not eat. And if there's a plant they don't like stinging nettles, they won't eat it when it's green, but in the fall they'll eat it. So I just have to change the season of where I go to work. And I think there's nothing I can't do with a herd of goats. Nothing. I just have to go in a different season.
But part of the reason why you do have issues like, say, with snakeweed and abortion and cattle and those sort of thing is because oftentimes it's the only thing that's green up. So you have a very devastated landscape. And so then if that's the only thing they've got to eat and they can't mix and match their food, then that's where you'll have trouble. But again, if we have an area that doesn't have, you can augment with feed too.
Border collies, electric fence, and the faster I move the herd. Like if we're in a high trot, they don't have time to strip the bark off the trees. If I let them hang around a long time, they'll start stripping bark. So it's all management. And the speed of the herd, which has nothing to do with eating, is a key behavior thing that I can use to do about anything I want to do. And also make them eat faster and eat different plants at different growth stages by moving faster or moving slower or making them stand still.
Species out here.
Months out of the year. Yep. And they recycle it too.
Why weathers?
No, the big wethers are my favorite. I have females and neutered males of all ages. The herd right now is it's pretty close to half and half wethers and does. Ages 3 months to 14 years. And they're all together. And we'll sort and, we might sort and take different ones to different places. We're going to be kidding in June, and we'll be on a Chevron oil contract in western Colorado. And we may sort and just put them in different areas so we can handle them better. No, I have everything. Everything of all ages and all colors.
This is the so-called killer algae, the Caulerpa taxifolia. Yeah. So, do you have a specific question about it, or? It's a kind of algae that is sort of unprecedented in the system, and they think it actually came out of the Marine Institute aquariums in Monaco when Jacques Cousteau was in charge. And it's been spread around quite a bit. It grows almost entirely vegetatively. It's a very strange kind of critter that has sort of no cell walls and lots of nuclei, and it just, it's really weird. I haven't heard of anybody who's figured out exactly a good way to suppress this stuff other than the very time and poison intensive way of actually putting a sheet of plastic over it underwater and pumping herbicide in underneath. and pretty much kills everything, right? Kill it all and let God sort it out. But there are a few things that nibble it. The problem is that people are not all that excited about introducing yet another species because they're worried about what that will do. Now, sometimes that gets overcome, that reluctance gets overcome, and there are good outcomes and there are less good outcomes.
Yes.
Well, you know, the old lady who swallowed a fly, right? So, yeah, I haven't heard anything about that one for a while. It hasn't sort of risen to the top of the news, but it's, you know, it pops up in a lot of places because all you need is a fragment of it and it, you know, grows vegetatively.
Yes, go ahead.
I think this goes to why we value native things in the first place. You know, I mean, and I can't tell someone, nor would I tell someone not to value a native thing, because I mean, I do too. I understand that, and I was raised good. I've got a master's degree in range from Colorado State University, and I was taught to hate tamarisk and kill it whenever possible, and all of that good stuff. On the other hand, I've you know, sort of looked at this a little more on my own and found that there is a subculture out there of folks who are saying, you know, are we really planning on weeding nature to keep it natural? So these are tough calls. I mean, is there a way? Sometimes there are changes in the system that make it actually better, make things like tamarisk or some other species actually better suited to that habitat as it exists now than the natives. And then it becomes a problem. If native is just a historical geographical idea, then you think one thing. If native is an ecological idea, you kind of have to start thinking another thing. This is one of the reasons that tamarisk has gotten so well established. It's because the way we manage water. As far as the Siberian elms, it sounds to me like you need to talk to the lady with the goats. But, you know, so if there are ways, I mean, if there are ways to do this without inflicting arguably more harm, then okay. But there's also this, we also have a value in wildness, and sometimes the wildest thing is the weed. And that's hard to take. But if we're busy changing something to make it, you know, if what we're doing is actively altering the system and making it more suitable for some of this stuff that follows us around because we tend to make systems more suitable for it, then you've got to, you know, kind of go back to how are we going to change ourselves? How are we going to change our own behavior? How are we going to change what we're doing? And if we can't, and if we're not willing to not go to the conference, so we're not worried about having something stuck in our shoe that's going to make it from wherever we were to wherever we're going, you might as well plan on this being a continuous sort of thing. This is the world that the human footprint is making it over again.
And I think also, you know, the paradigm shift that we're looking at, okay, what have we created that encourages the Siberian elm?
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And there were other animals that were at one point keeping those little seedlings that aren't there. So it's not just, it's, you know, there's a multitude of things that we're doing, a multitude of management practices. And if we, by letting nature run its course, actual option, then we are all deluded in the fact that we are constantly influencing nature. Symbiotic relationships, like what Lani her work, that makes the landscape what we want it to be in terms of healthier, feeding the soil, a way that serves multiple purposes, or do we want to just, you know, neglect, or do we want to do herbicides? I mean, we have all these tools available to us. Biggest challenge, we actually know how to create these landscapes. The biggest challenge is on those larger levels with public lands.
Yeah, but it is one of these things where hearts and minds are colliding, trying to figure out what you're going to do and what you want and what you can have and what you can't have. Well, I'll tell you what, those elms don't know they're Siberian.
That's right.
They never
By
have
now they're
been.
not. They're
They
a
never
few
have been.
generations in, so.
Although there are people, I mean, there are invasion biologists who will say categorically that if it's ever been moved by a human being, it doesn't matter how many generations down the road you are, it's still alien. Which I find kind of absurd because the system alters around it. You get you get a modified ecosystem, but it's not an ecosystem. It's different.
Well, and that also tends to differentiate humans from other animals that might inadvertently carry plants to new places. So we're different somehow? I mean, maybe we did it more intentionally, but it's the same process.
It does get down to the, I mean, we're getting down to how do humans relate to nature? Are we in it? Are we out of it? What does it mean?
Which is why you went into philosophy.
Well, it has part of that, you can't get away from that question because that's an argument that people will constantly raise.
Yeah. So you're talking about a noxious invasive species?
And we have, another reason tamarisk has gotten to be so common is that it can burn and regenerate, unlike cottonwoods. Well, some willows can, but, tamarisk is very resilient under. And where do most of our ignitions come from? They come from people out there banging around, doing something that ends up lighting a fire. And unless you can control that behavior, it's just one thing after another. And it's created, those systems are telling us what we're doing. I mean, they're really just showing us what is possible at the moment under the condition, under the way we're behaving. Yeah, well, Edward Abbey, and a lot of us will happily trust Edward Abbey's ideas. And Ed Abbey, in his early writings, always, started to mention tamarisk in positive terms. But then somewhere around about 1970, somebody changed his mind, and suddenly it was just the enemy. And tamarisk has had this very strange history of going from being the solution or something everybody wants to something everybody hates in a rather rapid click. And birds love them.
Yes, go ahead.
Here in Albuquerque at La Montanita Co-op. No, just at Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving only, I'm sorry. Yeah. I think they actually do have you order them, yeah. They start taking orders in November.
Get a big freezer, order several.
I do have a number of people that come and get like 6, 8, 10 birds from me so they can have them year round. Yes, we process right before Thanksgiving, so they're fresh. It is low. I don't know that we're gonna have a real runoff this year at all because the river's already very low. It's available in Albuquerque at the Western Mercantile on the south end of town and the Village Mercantile on Corrales. Yep. And it's available in Santa Fe, Gallup, Las Cruces, Taos, all over the state. Once you are feeding it to your chickens, they'll love you and you'll love their eggs. Yep.
Your first question was, do we eat our goats? Well, and I don't sell them to slaughter, but all of my tools are edible. But once I get them that kind of behavior, I can't afford to slaughter them. They're so valuable, you know, even up to 12, 13, 14 years old. Yeah, they are. They are. But sometimes we get bad behavior and they go to the barbecue pit. I don't think so, but usually I work where nobody wants pesticides, so usually it's not an overlap. But toxic things in the oil field, what we do is where nobody's been able to plant anything. I mean, no grass seed has ever grown, and you know that's not an oil spill or anything. But if I do have to trust people to tell me if there was something spilled there, you have to trust they'll tell you. It's very well regulated if they'll tell you. Right, I've been asked many times if I would go graze Rocky Flats, but never by the Rocky Flats people, only by the newspaper and the city and Boulder people. Never by Rocky Flats.
But there is some phytoremediation that happens with the plant. So, and the animal's ability to process the plant as well. Like, for example, when they were cattle on the copper mines for mine tailings, tests on the animals, they found that they were copper because the mines had done such a good job of taking every bit of copper out of the tailings that there was, as they grew their forage, there was no copper for them to ingest. So,
and also, you know, if there was a substance, then you would need to know where it's stored in the body. If it's stored in the hair or the fat or the milk or the hooves or who knows, or it wasn't stored at all. So if that was an issue, you just have to find out where it was. The cashmere goats shed once a year. When they shed once a year, we hand comb 650 head twice in a week some years ago, and I sold that raw fiber for $20 an ounce. But being a gypsy on the road, it's hard to manage that kind of work. We wanted to comb 1,000 head this spring, but always you have those equinox storms come in right in first part of April, and seems like storms always come in and then it bumps it. But being a gypsy, we don't have barns and corrals, and you have to have a labor pool. I sent them to Chadron State College in Nebraska the year we combed them, and the kids combed them on spring break. So anyway, it's a lot of management, but I just want to know if it was worth something if we did it, and it is. No, absolutely not. Well, and Ann, when I get done talking, I'll ask her to add to it. But what I do is manage time. So what I want to know when I go to a job is what's the goal? What is your goal? What do you want to grow here and why? Which plants do you want to grow here and why? Because I'm not really worried about the weeds. They're just there, and I'm just going to recycle all those nutrients and build the soil. I don't really care about that. I just want to know what do you want there, and then how far they eat it down or how much they eat off from it. If the plant is an annual or a biannual or a perennial woody plant, since I have a degree in all those things I paid for at college, I know what those are and how they're going to respond if the animal eats it this way or that way, or just eats the flowers off, or eats the flowers, eats all the leaves. Well, then it can't photosynthesize. It just depends on the goal. But no, they don't pull them out of the ground and never have. But that's bad management. That's the person's fault, not the animal's fault. You stayed there too long. You managed your time wrong.
The other thing is, normally because they're browse animals, they prefer to graze, 6 to 8 inches above the ground. But as she said, timing is everything. So if you leave them too long, or same thing in terms of they'll prune a tree versus girdling it, or really stripping the bark, all depending on how much time they're left.
Or they'll eat the good stuff first.
And ghosts don't like grass anyway. It's their last choice. I'd bring 500 head for 2 hours. Oh. Yep.
And I think her point is a really good one, that it's a stocking density. If you put 2 goats on there and leave them over time, they're going to be there all year, and they're going to feed on the good stuff first and maybe not. But you put so many of them on there that they have to eat everything, and you hammer it hard, and then you get them off.
So what Lonnie's saying is that would be 100 goat hours, right? You've got 50 goats for 2 hours. So you can do that any way you want, but ultimately she's saying it would be about 100 goat hours to clear it off. And the quicker you can do it with the longer recovery period, the better.
And the faster I'm out of there, the least trouble I have with whoever's got a meth lab in that house, you know, coming home and whatnot.
or the wild dogs.
Or the neighbor's dogs. Yep, the neighbor's pit bull coming over. Less chance for anything to go wrong the faster I can get out of there.
Charles, and then you. Go ahead.
Buy salt cedars? We're watching with great interest. The beetle thing is very complicated because for various reasons. One of which is that there were beetles of types that were not, they weren't admitting they were releasing that have been released. So there are beetles that doing things in places we weren't expecting them to do. Folks are just moving them around because they want them, so they go get them. The feds have already pretty much disavowed the program. APHIS walked away from it, but the state of Colorado is still churning beetles out like mad. And, you know, they'll sell them to you by the bucketful. They're in New Mexico. Right. Well, it's hard to say, you know, exactly how this is going to play out. The tamarisk is not all one thing. There are 2 or 3 species that have hybridized in the Southwest in ways that they have never hybridized anywhere else. We don't know what the beetles are going to find palatable. So they will, and there's just lots of big unknowns here. So, you know, tamarisk is providing some valuable habitat for certain things. And the ecosystem has been sort of rearranging around them, as I said. Now it's going to be sort of, you know, a lot of loose ends are going to be pulled out of it. We don't know how this is going to play. That there's nothing we know what, you know, we can't go out and kill the beetles either. Yeah. In some places, they have pretty much declared themselves to be tamarisk flycatchers.
Probably eat the beetles.
And they do eat the beetles, and I've been talking to some people who have been studying the various insectivorous critters, the lizards and all, and they're finding that huge numbers of these beetles are, you know, the beetles are now they're part of the system as well. They're not just eating and then, you know, dying, eating and breeding and dying, or they're getting eaten. They're getting eaten by lots of stuff. So there are many, many, many beetle bits in lizard scat and things like that. So there's an exciting career opportunity if you want to count beetle wings and covers in scat. We don't know. It's a big, semi-unplanned experiment, just like the tamarisk was. Right. They were imported. This was a government program. This was a Department of Agriculture program to go and find some beetles. And the beetles they supposedly released were ones that we were assured would not, and I don't know why they even bothered to try and assure us of this, but they did it for NEPA purposes, that these beetles couldn't really survive, wouldn't be active at below particular latitudes, about Grand Canyon. But there were other beetles released. And so they had at least 5 kinds that got out into the environment one way or the other. The people who wanted to kill the tamarisk were true believers in killing the tamarisk no matter what. We're just watching to see. So tamarisk is dominant in these systems now because it's just been an incredible tamarisk housing project. The Bureau of Reclamation built tamarisk habitat in the Southwest. And we don't know, we literally don't know. If it were possible to just remove the tamarisk now, we really don't know what would come in next. It wouldn't be the cottonwoods and willows because we don't have the hydrology for them anymore. You go out and plant them, I guess, and have a permanent garden system for growing that stuff, which they can do at a small scale in particular places. But we'd probably get some other foreign plant. You know, it'd probably be something else that would come in because there's just not that many things that can operate under those conditions, which are sort of unprecedented in this region.
Had a question.
50,000 acres is that job. But I don't do the whole thing. I just do the right pipelines and
Are you just suggesting goats aren't the answer to everything?
More dogs?
well, I think it's really easy, but if you own the land, you design what it is you want, and then I can design my work to make what you want. I just need to know what you want. But you can manage goats or children or grad students any way you want to. You just need to know the goal. Some are easier to handle than others.
Goats, children, grad.
That is actually how it works.
And Dr. Matt, what are those? I want to know. I want to see how smart you are because you and I both read. So what is that? Tell me what that is. What are those? Yeah. What are those animals? What are those? I meant to say this in my talk and then I forgot. Scapegoats.
Oh, scapegoats. Yes. Sorry.
Talk about
Yeah, I just wasn't with you.
Just to clarify your question, are you saying once you, okay, so Lani comes in and gets this kick started, then what? Is that your question? Or what happens if, right, so,
They go to the next
They
job.
go to the next place. Yeah.
right.
Well, this is the value of her system, is that she can take the goats in for as long
Right,
as they need to be.
So you're saying, I mean, my question is, why isn't Chevron, or whoever's place this is, having her manage the whole 50,000, not just the pads and the pipelines?
Right. That's actually BLM.
Okay, so BLM.
Yeah, why isn't BLM?
Yeah, so to me, the issue is, you know, they in their mind say, we got to reclaim these areas. And we can do it several ways, and Lonnie's one choice.
That was the first thing that worked in 60 years.
Right, so you've got a lot of these places where they're seeding, putting stuff down, nothing's coming up.
Spraying the weeds.
Yeah. Or any, you know, any of those, yes. I mean, basically what you're talking about is higher and lower successional. So if there's hardly anything that goes in a bad situation, cattle, but you're going to have to do the same thing. Your point is, they're not going to be able to sit there either. I mean, these are not things that can be parked and left. And so that is where it becomes more complex. Right now, Lonnie's having to go all around the west. What happens if we had enough need? Dentist in every town, accountant or a hardware store or whatever. Is Starbucks, exactly, that you have the local person. That's the human creativity. That's the challenge, is we're creating these new systems now.
And just to explain further to you, because you probably don't know all these things, this is BLM land. A cattle rancher has leased the surface rights to have the privilege of running cattle for some part of the summer season. Chevron Oil has leased the mineral rights. So they own, or they have the right to mine what's underground. The cowman has the right to harvest what is above ground for a certain time. And Chevron is responsible for the weed control of what they tear up, the pipeline, you know, they've torn up the surface. And the weeds, Chevron's responsible to put that back to native habitat. And sage grouse may be listed as endangered, is a very big deal in Wyoming. So Chevron is required to do that. Well, BLM holds Chevron's deposit money. What do you call those? Bonds. BLM holds a lot of bond money for Chevron, and they don't get that money back till they get something growing on these pipelines. I was the first thing in 60 years that worked to be able to get grass to grow on the pipelines, and Chevron was absolutely delighted. But they don't love me and goats. They got their money back. They got their money back in 3 years. And so see how complicated it is?
And is
I didn't get all the way down to it. Talk about that, Ann, what you were just saying.
Well, I was just saying, and I asked her, is the land now better shaped inside than outside? And she said yes. Because you could see that there was more weeds and shrubs on the outside, there was more grasses on the inside. So, you know, to me, that's a critical piece to remember too. But like they said, they just wanted to get something to grow so they could get their money and get out of there. That was their main goal.
They don't care about anything. They love me, but it's not me. It's they get the bond money back really fast. They pay me very well, but this picture right here, here's how I do things. And this is on a Chevron job at Durango, Colorado. And they had a whole bunch of heavy equipment working right next to me. And then I had one section, and this heavy machinery, they had 25 giant equipment things in there, and they ran 30 days. And I would see where, oh, wait a minute here. The dust was horrendous. I would, well, see me? I'd walk past the machinery with my goats every day, and the guys that weren't on the machinery would come out and watch me work, and the dogs and they were taking pictures all the time. And when I got to the end, I got $85,000, and I got cut off because Chevron was pissed off because these guys went over $1 million. And they were pissed off, so I couldn't get another $3,000 to haul some wood chips in that I got for free from the local. They had like 25 yards of wood chips they gave me free, but I had to get a truck to haul it in. Chevron cut me off because they were so pissed because those guys went over $1 million. I was right next to them. So I worked so cheap compared to that. But you see why it's so important, the paradigm shift of the people. The grassroots people have to catch up to me. I'm way out there in front. But I have to have policy change in Washington, D.C. and I got to have the grassroots people supporting me and buying John's turkeys. We got to have it all.
Just real quickly, I was asked to let folks know, and then we can continue, just to remind folks that at 6 o'clock there is a dinner at the Centennial Building west of here where dinner was last night. Jeff Moyer is the keynote speaker, and then there's a panel after that, so everyone is obviously most welcome to go there for dinner at 6. You had to...
I think the most important person in the room, Michael Chang, is you. Help me. It's you and your belief that this is a better way, and demand that people do it, and demand that your legislators vote in the correct way to take care of the land and build the soil and hold the water in the soil and put people like me, and my son works with me, put people like us to work and keep us working. And I wouldn't have to travel so far if more people would hire me in my neighborhood. I like to travel because I think it's fun. I mean, I like to go as far as I can, and because it's a great adventure, because I'm a Viking warrior, remember?
Is it just in the west where your demand is high right now? Or?
I go west of the Mississippi. I have not been east. I would go there, but I only have 1 or 2 or 3 jobs at a time, and I'd have to have a lot to stay there. But it's so important, and I see this change coming, and I'm so happy because we're on this wave, and I'm just happen to be right at the front of it. But we're on the wave, and it's here. And I'm so glad, but you are so important in your role of how you believe about how land should be taken care of and water, and if you care if the water's clean or not. You're so important, and I'm so glad you're in the room today.
Yes.
That's, you guys probably, Matt, you would know, but I just can't believe how lucky we are that you two are the only people in that whole side of the room, and you are who you are. What good luck is that? But
Yeah, well, you know, and there has been goats down on the Bosque, but they've been small little pilot projects. To me, it's somewhat like someone's thrown us a bone, and that's it. So, you know, if we're talking about, again, you look at this, millions and millions of dollars are being spent in this kind of reclamation work all over the country, and certainly here in New Mexico. So if we can make it happen where you can get the right people at the table to say, let's do more of the Bosque, let's do more of other areas that need reclamation work, there are people in the state having those contracts.
yeah, let's talk. Let's do something. And also, for me, I need to train. I need to teach. I need to teach people like Michael Chang how to work a dog. So it doesn't matter where he goes, he knows how to make goats do whatever anybody wants them to do. And a border collie, and I can teach you how to work a dog. I can teach you how to set the electric fence and train the goats to it. And I need to be teaching that so I can reach a lot more people. Oh, they had a giant, they moved them, except for the one big cottonwood there. They moved every one of those trees. They moved it around. Moved every one of those around. I couldn't believe it.
You can be sure they're dead now.
Yeah, yeah.
policies.
Also, just since we've brought up Wisconsin, I want to mention that when Aldo Leopold lived out here and had a backyard that backed up toward the Rio Grande, he planted a tamarisk there.
Shade? Was it for shade?
Yeah, Aldo, well, it wasn't. I don't think it was the only one in town, but he did plant one. His son remembered that and talked about it. So.
You know, when BLM prescribes their ways to whatever to do, the BLM employee sitting there, he has to be able to write a plan and then back it up through the literature to prove something. There is no proof, there is no data about how fast goats can reclaim and how much it costs. And I've been beating my head against the wall for 5 years trying to get University of Wyoming, Colorado State University, somebody to do some research so we can get those articles printed so those BLM and Forest Service guys have something to pull from when they write their plans. They don't have anything right now except either spray Tordon or 2,4-D or both.
Yeah.
I mean, you could try and bring in bison or elk.
If you find somebody who does that, yeah.
Yeah, and it'll make it a little more challenging. So do you really?
But it'll be more natural.
The work in the oil fields could easily be done with cattle if somebody would want to go do it. Hard work. It's work. It's easier to handle the goats, I think. But right. I asked those guys because my herd weighed 110,000 pounds is what that goat herd weighed. And those big machines over there, I went over there and asked them, and I think one of those big earth-moving grader dealies, he said weighed 80,000 pounds. So my machine was heavier. My machine was heavier. I was doing 12 things at the same time. There was 27 different tractors and machines out there because each one could only do one thing.
Yeah.
Had to be hauled in, did its one thing, had to be hauled out. And they're probably paying them $1,100 an hour.
And there's easily $1 million worth of machines in that picture.
Right.
Oh, way more than
Yeah.
that.
So.
And they milked that. They milked it, and they milked it, and it was pissing everybody off. And the county commissioner lived across the road, and he was on my side. But see, the point is, Michael Chang, is we got to start, and all those people saw. Now, all the people, and you can see this from the highway, all the people driving by next year will notice what's growing where. And so it's a start. We just got to start, and now we've got to run with it. But if we can have some help at all the levels, like policy making, but I just see the energy of you young, smart people, as the timing of you guys showing up with interest.
And maybe to take it to a slightly different point, you mentioned the lack of research, and certainly one of the big issues is always, well, who's going to fund the research? But there are funds available through organizations like SARE, the USDA SARE, that they fund sustainable agriculture projects. And again, some young, energetic